Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Brad Dyke, just reaching out to you and replying back to some people who said, hey, can you tell me about storage? Now, I don't mean about the storage that I'm playing with today, like FreeNAS and TrueNAS and media platforms and, disks that I buy and try to put them in SATA or an eSATA or a USB 3 box or something like that. No, explain to me why everybody is so passionate about ZFS and where are the roots from that coming from? Why did ZFS come into existence? Well, great question. So this is going to be kind of a 1, 2, 3 lesson. So I apologize. Not going to be too much aesthetics on the electronic side or pictures or things like that. But I will have some things I'll show you in props that will be involved in this to explain history of why we did what we did back in the 90s and actually back in the 80s and 70s. So a long time ago, there used to come out this thing called the computer. We refer to it as the building. That means the entire building was the computer. Universities and institutions and special laboratories would have these computers, but human beings didn't have such a thing, such as a personal desktop or capacity. We actually called them PS2, PCs, and things like that. You see, the key detail here is that in the days of floppy drives, this was considered cutting-edge technology. What was not considered technology, advanced technology, was something known as SCSI. And SCSI, if you look at these great big giant connectors, was the thing. And the thing cost a fortune. Lots and lots and lots of staggering amounts of money. And you know what? In comparison to what we're used today, didn't do well. Yeah, they provided you capacity and it was functional and it was able to boot up something, but it was usually a data collect device and it was extraordinarily expensive. So expensive that companies had to figure out a way of getting small hard drives together and smash them together to create a larger drive, but they're shared. Kind of like a redundant array of inexpensive drives. R-A-I-D? RAID, maybe? Yeah, RAID. That's right. So way back in the day, somebody figured out, well, we don't need big chunks of hard drive capacity. We can just get these cheap hard drives, strap them together, and we could get, wow, 50 gigs, maybe, tops. 50 gigs, as in bringing 5, 10 gig drives together. And that was just a volume of one. In other words, it had nothing. It wasn't special. It was just adding another drive to another drive to another drive for a total of 50 gigs. No redundancies of any kind. And 50 gigs was a staggering amount of capacity back in the day. And all of a sudden, the beginnings of an industry came in. We called it direct attached storage using something called SCSI, small computer serial interface, SCSI. And we could put these really low capacity hard drives in, 10 of them. And we could build these groups called RAID groups. And these groups would provide you capacity because we wanted to save money. Keep that front mindset in your head. To save money, it's cheap. A redundant array of inexpensive drives. So 10 years go by, people start doing this and it becomes a standard. And not only a standard, but companies called Compaq, ZFS, the Cow, Dell. Michael Dell came into the world with his servers and so many other manufacturers, Micron PC, and they built these servers, these new things called x86 servers, and they could have these RAID arrays of disks that were much cheaper than anything that they quote-unquote called in the enterprise days. And by the way, it was very expensive, like 16 times more expensive. And that was called fiber channel. Yeah. So the other side of the fence said, hey, we can do this too. We can make our fiber channel drives more cost effective, get into the market, put them in, and we can do the same thing as these SCSI RAID controllers can do, and we can do it better. Hence the term fiber channel. Now, This is where things kind of take a twist. You see, the twist is the term fiber channel doesn't actually refer to fiber optics. The nature of fiber channel is the nature of a protocol. And the protocol matters because the protocol allows you to use your own form of communication, not like SCSI communication, which is basically a serial pipe connection. It allows you to formulate a protocol, and this is important, that you can use for storage capacity, and then that can offer a level of interface that's unique to that one manufacturer or a group of manufacturers. Keep in mind that's an important detail because it's something it's going to come back later. So with that being said, all of a sudden, from the industry side, fiber channel, the most expensive capacity manufacturers found that they could move to fiber channel, make it the top dog and the best in the world for you to use. And the end result would be you would be the more expensive part of the equation, not necessarily cheapest, but you're highly redundant because we took fiber channel and made it into a complete standardized protocol. No different than SCSI, no different than IDE, which is what we were just beginning to experience in the PC industry. And using the IDE hard drive was the most common way to begin to go from megs of available capacity, 500 megs here and so on, to gigs, and from gigs to tens, hundreds, and so on until we are in today's world using SATA and other capacities such as SAS for very, very high capacity hard drives, single hard drives, mind you. And again, that terminology, cheap, it keeps coming back. But at this point in stage, the RAID industry, the people who made that thing called the RAID controller and gave you RAID groups, they got really good at this. Not only did they get really good at it, they made it a native protocol, just like Fiber Channel made its protocols a native environment. That's important because something called hardware RAID came into existence. And this is what begins to drive the thing, the ZFS, into the equation. Just like the big blue IBM pressured the world to spend tremendous amounts of money for a little bit of capacity, so did Fiber Channel and RAID industries, the people who made, quote unquote, redundant array of inexpensive hard drives, costly, kind of really costly. But Fiber Channel, RAID, hardware-wise, native, excellent. You don't need anything. These things take care of themselves. The operating system has no value whatsoever. So as we're going into the 90s and you're going into the 2000 and heading into 2010, a bunch of young, very unemployed style technicians and engineers came together and said, hey, I'm tired of this. Everything costs a fortune. You can't do this anymore. RAID isn't what RAID is. Let's just make RAID without all the hardware. So they created something, basically ZFS. And ZFS actually comes from the Oracle side / Sun environment, where they were discussing using software protocols and then putting them on top of overlaid hardware. And I actually deployed the ZFS 1600 series chassis, which were excellent chassis, powerful, lots of memory and all of that. But it fell on its face because Oracle went down the path of the most expensive solution. But ZFS came out of it inevitably because what they did is they said, hey, I need something cheap. I need to take any hard drive, old, new, you name it, whatever it is. I need to put it with something, and I'll use software to make my groups. And so they went out there and they simply took basic HBAs, host bus adapter cards, that they could buy on the cheap, recycled hardware that had no real advanced functionality, except that what they did was they detected the hard drives on the environments that they're working with. Now, these cards come in different formats. Now, the formats came out in all types of basic standards. I mean, like, for instance, you got a P400 here with this SATA SAS interface platform. And they said, well, you know what? It's an old card, but if I dumb it down by going into the BIOS and basically flashing it to disable the RAID functionality and just use its ability to detect hard drives, and where you could go into, 4 bus channels, as you see here, and make this guy basically a native HBA base only card. And yeah, I'm not kidding. People go in and they will get the flash firmware that will just make these standard RAID standard controller cards, not RAID cards, and they flip them from a RAID mode because they don't want to deal with the RAID. They want to deal with the RAID through their operating system. So the value of this is something that made cheap recyclable components out on eBay feasible. Not only feasible, but it developed multiple new markets, all because, yet again, people are trying to do things cheaply. So here we are for the 4th time. We had the high-end SCSI environments and the high-end fiber channels. Then somebody came in and said, let's use cheap hard drives. Let's create this redundant array. Let's call it RAID. And then over time, that became overpriced because that's what people do. They charge you till you can't use it anymore. So you reinvent the wheel again. Now, these young engineers don't have an established market. They don't have salaries. They don't have 15 years of RAID experience behind their belts and things like that. They're just young kids coming out of college wanting to learn and start and grow in this field. So they invented, or in this case, for the 3rd time, reinvented RAID in a new way. Instead of being a hardware native RAID, they went software RAID. So Fiber Channel is very important in that equation because HBAs, host bus adapters, the QLogic baseline cards, these cards and how they function work in a native platform. So the question comes into the last standing protocol that existed. Now, I already told you a little bit about this at the beginning, something called Fiber Channel, and Fiber Channel became a protocol. Well, not only did it become a protocol, but it became a very cash cowish kind of protocol because it would allow companies like Brocade, McData, EMC to create SAN networks, storage area networks. And the protocol that the switches would run between the hosts, those would be the servers, by the way, and to the storage arrays that were extraordinarily expensive. EMC is the biggest cash cow in that equation, which they would connect to using Fiber Channel as their routing protocol. And for 2 very key reasons. One, Fiber Channel would not and cannot work over IP because it is a storage native protocol. And because it's a storage native protocol, it needs to work in a storage native network, hence a SAN. Very incredibly secure. You just can't get into them. You can't hack into them. They're just too tight. But again, a nice young entrepreneur came in and I said, if I smash this Ethernet switch into this Fiber Channel switch called a McData 1650, we could take a dark pair of Ethernet fiber connections from point A to point B, and we could create a tunnel. And this is back in the day, just before other tunnels began to come into existence, such as MPLS, VPNs, and so on. And it just dawned on these guys that, hey, we can take Fiber Channel and pump it into an Ethernet port tunnel from point A to point Z, and it's still Fiber Channel. They're correct. You can create an actual tunnel using Ethernet networks to do FCoE, Fiber Channel over Ethernet. And it gives you those functionalities, but you shortcut all those vendors in the industry who want to charge you an arm and a leg to use the most pristine golden code of all forms of storage, and that's Fiber Channel. So that's what this video is about, is to show you the innovation of those people who don't have, and how they took what was a standard and an expensive standard, and they flipped it on itself flipped that dime and made it worth a penny again, so that people like yourselves and me can turn around and use them. So I hope this helps a little bit. It's a history lesson, mostly. Don't need to get into the details and too much because, frankly, there's a lot of dispute on some of that. And who cares? The point is, the overall history is, you see us reinventing things over and over and over. And that's kind of like what I do here as well. I have turned things that used to do one thing and I make them completely into a whole different thing because of you. People out there who have ideas and I think, oh, you know what? I can do that. Or some of you create some software that was basically somebody coming out of the box and looking in the box from a different angle. And then they realized, oh, I can do this now. So that's the reason why I bring this up to you. Keep thinking out of the box. Keep understanding the innovation and the nature of who and what you are. You're going to have some real enjoyable fun and you're going to go to places that other people aren't there. And that's how new innovations and technologies come into existence. So this is Brad Dyke. I'm signing off. God bless. I hope you guys have fun. I hope you learn a little. And let me know your comments. Like if you like. Take care. Bye-bye.